After the fire, my son said, "Oh, I don't need another mouth to feed." And my wife whispered, "Oh, if he comes, we'll pretend we're not here." But when they saw me on the news that evening, my phone rang 73 times. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My hands trembled as I held the phone, standing among the ashes of what used to be my home. The acrid smell of burnt wood filled the night air, mixing with the cold dampness that settled over Middletown after sunset. Streetlights cast long shadows across the debris scattered on my front lawn. Decharred pieces of my life, 40 years of memories reduced to blackened fragments. The cracked screen of my phone reflected the orange glow from the streetlight as I dialed Freeman's number. My fingers, still stained with soot from searching through the ruins earlier, fumbled with the buttons. Twice I had to start over. "Dad?" Freeman's voice came through tired, distant. "Freeman, My voice caught. I straightened my shoulders, trying to maintain the dignity I'd carried for 64 years. "The house burned down this morning. Everything's gone." Silence stretched between us. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background, Victoria's voice murmuring something I couldn't make out. "That's terrible, Dad, but I don't need an extra mouth to feed right now." Freeman's words hit like a physical blow. "We have our own problems here." I stepped closer to the phone, pressing it harder against my ear. Victoria's whisper came through crystal clear. "If he comes here, let's just pretend we're not home." The world tilted. My son said nothing to correct her, nothing to defend me. The silence that followed felt heavier than the debris crushing my old life. "Freeman." My voice came out steady, despite everything collapsing inside me. I heard everything she just said. "Dad, that's not..." Victoria didn't mean... His stammering filled the space where an apology should have been. 47 years old, and you still can't stand up to your wife when your father needs help. The line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. A car passed by on Maple Street, its headlights briefly illuminating the melted remains of my mailbox, the twisted metal that used to spell out cruise. The driver slowed down, probably gawking at the destruction, then sped up again. The phone felt heavy in my hand. I'd built Freeman's life with these same hands that now shook from betrayal rather than age. Every callus, every scar on my fingers told a story of sacrifice for a son who wouldn't even let me sleep on his couch. I walked toward the street, my work boots crunching on broken glass and ash. Behind me, the skeletal remains of my house stood like a monument to everything I'd lost in one day. The foundation was still there, solid as the day I'd poured it, but everything else had been consumed. The neighborhood around me buzzed with the quiet activity of families settling in for the night. Warm light spilled from windows, painting golden rectangles on lawns where children's toys lay scattered. Normal lives, continuing as if my world hadn't just ended twice in 12 hours. I reached the sidewalk and stopped. The street stretched ahead of me, empty and dark, leading away from everything familiar. My phone buzzed with a text message, but I didn't look at it. Whatever Freeman had to say now, it was too late. The cold night air bit through my work shirt. I'd grabbed it from the truck this morning, never imagining it would be the only clean clothes I'd have left by evening. The fabric smelled like smoke and sweat, and the bitter taste of family betrayal. I slipped the phone into my pocket and looked back at the ruins one more time. A piece of charred paper caught my eye, pinned under a chunk of fallen beam. Even from here, I could see the official letterhead D mortgage documents probably. The irony wasn't lost on me. That paper reminded me of another document I'd signed 22 years ago, a cashier's check for $30,000 written out to Freeman Cruz for his house down payment. I could still see his face that day at Middletown First Bank, excitement radiating from every pore as he bounced on his heels beside me. "Dad, I can't believe you're doing this for me," he'd said, watching me sign the loan papers with my construction-weathered hands. "I'll pay you back, every penny, I promise." The memory felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I kicked at a piece of blackened wood, sending it skittering across the ash-covered lawn. Near where my garage used to stand, I spotted the melted remains of car keys. My old truck keys, probably. But they made me think of Freeman's first car. A blue Honda Civic, $15,000, that I'd handed over without question in 2005. We'd spent an entire Saturday at the dealership on Route 4. Freeman test-driving every vehicle on the lot, while Victoria stood beside him, already criticizing his choices. "This one's too small," she'd said about a perfectly good sedan. "That one's too old. Can't you find something better?" I'd watched my son's face fall with each complaint, then stepped forward and told the salesman we'd take the Civic. Freeman had hugged me right there on the lot, keys still warm in his palm. "You won't regret this, Dad. I'm going to make you proud." The memory dissolved as a cold wind picked up, scattering ash across my shoes. I calculated automatically, the way I always did when my mind needed something concrete to hold on to. $30,000 for the house, $15,000 for the car, $45,000, and that wasn't counting the smaller amounts over the years. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was using my reputation to get him the bank job. I'd called Mike Henderson on a Tuesday morning in 2008, swallowing my pride to ask a favor. 30 years of honest construction work in Middletown had earned me something, and I'd spent that currency on Freeman's future. "Mike, you know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important," I'd said into the phone, standing in this very spot where ash now covered the ground. "Freeman needs a chance, and I'm hoping you might have an opening." Mike had hired him within the week. Assistant manager track, good benefits, steady pay. All because people in this town trusted the crew's name. All because I'd built half the houses in Middletown and never once delivered shoddy work. Freeman had promised he wouldn't forget. "I owe you everything, Dad. Everything." I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the empty street. The numbers kept adding up in my head. D, not just money, but years of sacrifice. I'd delayed my own retirement, worked extra jobs, lived in this modest house while he built his McMansion on the other side of town. A neighbor's porch light flickered on across the street. Mrs. Patterson, probably wondering who was standing in the ruins this late at night. I turned away before she could come outside with questions I didn't want to answer. The ash under my feet was still warm in spots like dying coals, just like the anger building in my chest. Tao, not the hot rage that burns out quickly, but the slow, steady heat that could sustain itself for a long time. The kind of anger that plans, that waits, that builds something more dangerous than fire. Freeman thought he was done with me. He thought hanging up the phone meant the conversation was over. But 47 years old and still hiding behind his wife's decisions, still unable to stand on his own after everything I'd given him, I needed somewhere to sleep tonight. The streets of Middletown stretched ahead of me, empty and cold. My footsteps echoed against the quiet sidewalk as I walked away from Maple Street. Each step took me further from the smoking ruins and deeper into the heart of Middletown, where streetlights created pools of yellow light on empty pavement. The memories from earlier burned in my mind, feeding something darker than grief. Henderson's house appeared on my left, a neat two-story colonial with warm light spilling from the living room windows. Mike had gotten Freeman that bank job, had trusted my word when I vouched for my son's character. I slowed my pace, imagining knocking on that door, explaining how the man he'd hired had just refused to help his own father. But my feet kept moving. Pride runs deep when you've spent 64 years earning respect with your hands. The Wilson place came next, set back from the street behind the deck I'd built for them 3 summers ago. Tom Wilson still owed me for materials I'd bought out of my own pocket when his budget ran short. I could see him through the kitchen window, probably having a late dinner with his wife, safe, warm, surrounded by family who actually cared about each other. How could I knock on that door and admit my own son had turned me away? How could I explain that the man who'd raised Freeman Cruz D, the Freeman Cruz who worked at their bank, who they probably saw as successful and responsible D, was sleeping on the streets? My hands clenched into fists inside my jacket pockets. The cold night air cut through the fabric, reminding me that I was running out of options and daylight both. Thompson's house stood dark except for an upstairs bedroom window. I'd fixed their roof after the tornado 2 years back, had refused payment when Jim Thompson was out of work. "We take care of our neighbors," I'd told him. "That's what community means." But what did community mean when your own blood wouldn't take care of you? I stopped walking and stood under a streetlight, feeling the weight of 37 years of goodwill in this town. Everyone knew Otis Cruz. Everyone respected the work I did, the way I kept my word, how I'd helped build this place into something worth living in. But respect doesn't translate to charity, and charity is what I'd need now. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I'd become someone who needed charity. my pride rebelled against the thought of explaining my situation to people who looked up to me. What would I tell them? That my son, D, the boy they'd watched grow up, the man they trusted with their mortgages, D had listened to his wife whisper about pretending not to be home rather than help his father? The neon sign of the Sunrise Inn flickered in the distance, casting red and blue light across the empty parking lot of Murphy's Hardware. I'd worked on that motel's renovation 5 years ago, had installed the shower fixtures in half those rooms with my own hands. But at least there, I'd be another customer, not Otis Cruz asking for handouts. I patted my jacket pocket, feeling the familiar bulge of my wallet. Enough cash for a few nights, maybe a week if I was careful. Money I'd kept aside for emergencies, though I'd never imagined an emergency quite like this. The walk from downtown took me past Freeman's Bank building, dark and imposing against the night sky. Middletown First Bank, where my son made decisions about other people's financial futures while refusing to secure his own father's immediate needs. The irony tasted bitter in my mouth. My pace quickened as the motel grew closer. The vacancy sign hummed with electrical current, and I could see light coming from the office window. Real beds, hot water, a door I could lock against the world while I figured out what came next. But as I approached the building, something else began crystallizing in my mind. Freeman thought this was over. He thought hanging up the phone meant he could go back to his comfortable life, pretend his father didn't exist, maybe tell Victoria he'd handled the situation. He had no idea what he'd just set in motion. I reached for the office door handle, my calloused fingers wrapping around the cold metal. The fluorescent light inside revealed a tired-looking clerk behind bulletproof glass, probably reading a magazine to pass the late shift hours. The door creaked as I stepped inside. Behind bulletproof glass, a young clerk with tired eyes looked up from his crossword puzzle. $23 for the night, cash up front. He handed me a key attached to a plastic diamond D room 7. The room smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and decades of cigarette smoke that no amount of sanitizing could eliminate. Faded brown carpet stretched between mismatched furniture, and a flickering fluorescent light cast everything in harsh shadows. I removed my work boots, setting them beside the door, and sat heavily on the bed's edge. The springs protested under my weight. Channel surfing became automatic, my thumb working the remote while my mind replayed the evening's betrayal. Static filled most stations, the old television requiring patience and precise angles to catch signals clearly. I landed on a cooking show, then some late-night movie, searching for anything to quiet my thoughts. WMTN News appeared suddenly on Channel 7. I almost clicked past it, but something made me pause. The camera showed a house, my house, still smoking in the darkness. Crime scene tape fluttered in the night breeze. Gas leak explosion destroys longtime resident's home, the reporter announced. Sarah Mitchell, according to the caption at the bottom of the screen. She stood exactly where I'd made that phone call to Freeman, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. Otis Cruz, 64 years old, lost everything in this morning's blaze. My name on television. I leaned forward, adjusting the volume as my heart began racing. Mr. Cruz is a local construction worker who has built many homes throughout Middletown over his 4-decade career. The camera panned across the debris, showing the melted mailbox, the charred doorframe that had once welcomed countless neighbors seeking my help. They interviewed Mrs. Patterson from across the street. Otis helped us all at one time or another, she said, wrapping a robe tighter around herself. He built our deck, fixed our roof after that storm 2 years back. He deserves better than this. The camera returned to Sarah Mitchell. This devastating loss affects a man who has given so much to our community. If you'd like to help Mr. Cruz during this difficult time, we'll have information on our website about how donations can be made. Donations. Strangers offering help, while my own son slammed the door in my face. I sat straighter, processing what I'd just witnessed. They knew my name. They understood what I'd contributed to this town. The reporter had done her research, 4 decades of construction work, the houses I'd built, the reputation I'd earned through honest labor and keeping my word. Even strangers show more concern than Freeman, I said aloud to the empty room. The story continued with more neighbor interviews. Tom Wilson appeared on screen, standing in front of the deck I'd built for him. Otis never asked for anything in return. When times were tough for us, he'd bring materials from his own pocket. Middletown needs to take care of him now. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent and dark. Freeman hadn't called back, hadn't sent a text to check if I'd found somewhere to stay. But here were people I barely knew, expressing genuine concern for my situation. The contrast hit me like cold water. I reached for my phone and saved the news station's number from the screen. Maybe this changed things. Maybe Freeman would see this story and realize his mistake. Or maybe it would teach him that actions have consequences, that turning your back on family doesn't happen in a vacuum. The late-night movie returned, but I left the television on for background noise. The reporter's words echoed in my mind as I stretched out on the scratchy bedspread, still fully clothed. A man who has given so much to our community. Freeman had thrown away $45,000 and a lifetime of sacrifice with one phone call. But the story was bigger now, public, spreading beyond just our family drama. I closed my eyes, listening to the hum of the ice machine down the hall and the distant sound of traffic on Route 4. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of television cameras and newspaper headlines, of a community rallying around one of their own, while an ungrateful son discovered that some mistakes have very public consequences. The phone's shrill ring cut through my sleep like a buzzsaw. I jolted awake, disoriented, the television still flickering with morning news broadcasts. The digital clock beside the bed showed 8:00 a.m. My neck ached from sleeping in yesterday's clothes, and the taste in my mouth reminded me that I hadn't brushed my teeth or done much of anything resembling normal hygiene since the fire. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number with a 513 area code D local, but not Freeman. Part of me hoped it might be him calling to apologize, to offer the help he should have given 12 hours ago. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Cruz, this is Linda Watson from the Middletown Community Foundation." Her voice carried the practiced warmth of someone accustomed to delivering both good and bad news. "I saw the story about your house fire on WMTN News last night." "Yes?" I sat up straighter, running my free hand through my hair. "We handle disaster relief for situations exactly like yours. I've already received several calls this morning about starting an emergency fund in your name." She paused, probably expecting surprise. "Would you be comfortable with our organization coordinating donations on your behalf?" The words didn't quite register at first. Donations? From who? Well, Sarah Mitchell from WMTN contributed $500 after she filed her story. 3 of your neighbors called before 7 this morning, each wanting to contribute. The Peterson family, the Wilsons, and someone named Henderson. Mike Henderson. The man who'd given Freeman his banking job, who trusted my recommendation without question. Now he was contributing money to help me, while my son counted the cost of letting me sleep on his couch. "Mr. Cruz, are you still there? I'm here. People I don't even know want to help." The morning news reran your story at 7. Our phones have been ringing steadily since then. Paper shuffled in the background. "We can have an emergency fund account established by noon today, with a way for people to contribute immediately. Is that something you'd want?" I looked around the motel room, defaded carpet, flickering light, the smell of other people's problems soaked into every surface. Yes, I think that would be good." Within minutes of hanging up, the phone rang again. Mike Henderson's familiar voice came through, thick with emotion I hadn't expected. "Otis, I had no idea things were this bad. Why didn't you call me last night?" I thought about it, but I couldn't finish the sentence without revealing Freeman's betrayal. "I figured you had your own family to worry about." "That's exactly the kind of thinking that got you sleeping in a motel instead of my guest room." His voice carried a hint of frustration, directed at me, but also at something deeper. "Listen, I want to help coordinate this fund thing. Can you meet me at Denny's in an hour? We need to talk about logistics." Before I could answer, call waiting beeped, another unknown number. "Mike, let me call you back. I think there's another call about this." "There will be more than one call, Otis. This is just the beginning." The second caller was a volunteer coordinator from the Methodist Church, offering to organize meal deliveries. The third was the owner of Murphy's Hardware, wanting to donate building supplies when I was ready to rebuild. The fourth was an elderly woman whose voice I didn't recognize, asking for the address where she could bring a cash donation. Each conversation felt surreal, like I was listening to someone else's life. Strangers expressing concern, offering practical help, treating my situation as a community emergency that required immediate action. The contrast with Freeman's cold dismissal grew sharper with every call. I managed to reach Mike back between calls. 10 o'clock at Denny's? Make it 10:15. This phone hasn't stopped ringing since 7 this morning. He paused. Otis, have you told Freeman about all this? About the fund? Freeman has his own concerns right now. What kind of concerns keep a man from helping his father after losing everything? I didn't answer directly. Mike would understand soon enough when the full scope of this situation became clear. When Freeman discovered that his father's story had touched the entire community while he sat in his comfortable house, pretending not to be home. Getting dressed felt like preparation for something larger than just a breakfast meeting. I had 12 missed calls, and it wasn't even 9 o'clock yet. Linda Watson had been right. This was just the beginning. The phone rang again as I reached for the door handle. I glanced at the screen. Freeman's number, finally calling back. I let it ring, pocketing the phone as I stepped into the bright morning sunlight. He could wait. The community that actually cared about me was waiting at Denny's. Mike was already seated in a booth by the window when I arrived at Denny's, his phone face up on the table beside a steaming coffee cup. The restaurant buzzed with typical morning activity D-shift workers grabbing breakfast before heading home, retirees meeting for their daily coffee gathering, the steady rhythm of a small town starting its day. $7,400, Mike said without preamble as I slid into the opposite seat. That's what came in during the 2 hours since we talked on the phone. The number hit me like a physical blow. I'd expected maybe a few $100s, the kind of modest community response you'd see for a church fundraiser or school project. 7,000? Linda Watson called me 20 minutes ago with the update. 1,200 came from employees at the bank alone. Mike's expression carried satisfaction mixed with irony. Your son's co-workers, contributing their own money to help you while he trailed off, studying my face. While what exactly? I deflected by focusing on the practical aspects. What kind of people are contributing? Mike consulted notes on his phone. Construction companies you've worked with over the years. $800 so far. Individual donations from families throughout Middletown, most between $10 and $100 each. 3 local businesses have committed significant amounts. He looked up. Murphy's Hardware, the grocery store on Main Street, and that new restaurant on the square. The waitress approached, coffee pot in hand. Are you Otis Cruz? She asked, filling my cup without waiting for an answer. I saw you on the news. Here's $20. She pulled a crumpled bill from her apron pocket and placed it beside my coffee. I know what it's like to lose everything. After she moved on, Mike leaned forward. It's been like this all morning. People recognizing your name, wanting to help immediately. The social media sharing has been incredible. Over 200 shares of the news story on Facebook alone. His phone buzzed with another notification. He glanced at it and showed me the screen. 7,900 now. $500 just came in from someone named Patricia Chen. Do you know her? I shook my head. Another stranger contributing more money than my own son had been willing to offer in temporary shelter. 15 volunteers have signed up to help with whatever you need, Mike continued, scrolling through messages. A moving company offered free services when you're ready. 2 real estate agents called with information about temporary housing options. The Methodist Church wants to coordinate meal deliveries. And someone from the Rotary Club asked about organizing a neighborhood workday when you decide to rebuild. The magnitude of response overwhelmed me. 40 years of honest work, of helping neighbors and keeping my word, had created something I'd never expected. A community that actually remembered, that valued what I'd contributed, that was willing to give back when I needed help. This is what community looks like, Mike said, unconsciously echoing thoughts I couldn't voice. You helped build half this town, Otis. Now it's rebuilding you. A patron at the next table had been listening to our conversation. He stood up, approaching our booth with his wallet already open. You're Otis Cruz, aren't you? You built my garage 15 years ago. He placed a $50 bill on our table. Best work I ever had done. This isn't charity, it's payment overdue. Mike's phone rang as the man walked away. He answered, then covered the mouthpiece. It's the Middletown Gazette. They want to do an interview about the fund, about your response to the community support. I paused, considering. Freeman still didn't know about any of this. He was probably at the bank right now, conducting business as usual, maybe telling coworkers that his father's situation was unfortunate, but not his responsibility. He had no idea that those same coworkers had contributed $1,200 to help the man he'd turned away. An interview would make the story even more public, would spread beyond just the immediate community. It would ensure that everyone in Middletown D, including Freeman D, understood exactly what had happened, who had stepped up to help, and who had remained conspicuously absent. "Yes," I told Mike. "I'll talk to them." Mike uncovered the phone. "He'll do the interview. When can you meet?" He listened, then looked at me. 11:30 this morning, here at the restaurant." I nodded. Freeman's shift at the bank didn't end until 5 o'clock. By then, the newspaper interview would be online, the story spreading through every social media account and coffee shop conversation in Middletown. He'd discover the full scope of his mistake not through a private conversation, but through the very public revelation of his father's support and his own absence from it. Mike finished the call and set his phone down. "Otis, I have to ask directly. Where was Freeman in all this? Why didn't you call him first?" I met his eyes across the table. "I did call him, last night, right after the fire department finished at the house. And?" The question hung in the air between us. Outside the restaurant window, Middletown carried on with its normal rhythm, unaware that one of its most respected residents was about to become the center of a very public family drama. "He'll find out soon enough," I said, reaching for Mike's phone to confirm the interview time. Mike suggested we head to the Community Foundation office after I confirmed the newspaper interview time. "Linda wants to show you something," he said, finishing his coffee and leaving a generous tip for our waitress. "She said you need to see the latest numbers in person." The drive to Elm Street took 5 minutes through downtown Middletown, past the bank where Freeman worked, past the hardware store that had contributed supplies, past neighbors who had opened their wallets for a man whose own son had shut the door. Mike parked outside a modest brick building with a simple sign reading Middletown Community Foundation. Inside, controlled chaos filled the small meeting room. Linda Watson stood at a conference table covered with papers, calculators, and neat piles of cash. 3 volunteers sat with laptops open, entering data and fielding phone calls. The scene looked like a campaign headquarters during election night. "Otis!" Linda looked up, her face flushed with excitement and exhaustion. "I'm so glad you're here. You need to see this." She gestured toward the table where money was sorted into careful stacks, cash in neat bundles, checks paper-clipped together, printouts of electronic transfers arranged by amount. One volunteer worked with an adding machine, its paper tape spilling onto the floor. "We've been counting for 3 hours," Linda continued, consulting a notepad covered with calculations. Electronic donations, cash drop-offs, checks from businesses, even money orders from people who drove in from neighboring towns. The volunteer with the adding machine looked up. "Final total, confirmed twice." She paused dramatically. $78,647. The number hit me like a physical force. I sat down heavily in the nearest chair, asking Linda to repeat what I'd just heard. $78,000, Otis, in less than 24 hours. Mike whistled low. "That's enough to buy any house in Middletown outright." A volunteer from the Methodist Church appeared at my elbow. People kept coming all day with cash, checks, everything. I've never seen anything like this response. She showed me a composition notebook filled with donor names. Over 400 individual contributions. Linda spread out papers showing the breakdown. 1,200 from bank employees, as Mike mentioned. 800 from construction companies, 2,000 from individual families. 15,000 from 3 major donors, D business owners whose buildings you worked on. The rest came from everywhere. D grocery store, checkout donations, people stopping by after seeing the news, even children bringing allowance money. Another volunteer called out from her laptop. "The online fund is still active. 47 new donations in the last hour." "How is this possible?" I asked, genuinely bewildered. "You built this community, Otis," Linda said simply. "For 40 years, you helped families build their dreams, fix their problems, never charge full price when times were tough. People remember. They want to give back." A construction worker I recognized from various job sites entered the office, carrying an envelope. "Heard about Otis Cruz," he said, handing it to Linda. "From the guys at Morrison Construction, $500. After he left, Linda turned to me. "We've never seen anything like this response. The story touched something deep in people. They're not just donating money. They're They're making a statement about what kind of community they want to live in. The phone rang again. Linda answered, listened, then covered the mouthpiece. WMTN News wants to do a live interview about the fund. The reporter says it's a record-breaking disaster relief response. I looked around the room at the evidence of my community's generosity. $78,000. Enough to buy a house outright, enough to rebuild my life completely, enough to demonstrate to Freeman exactly what he'd walked away from when he chose his wife's whispered concerns over his father's desperate need. "Yes," I said. "I'll do it." Linda uncovered the phone. "He'll do the interview. When?" She listened, checking her watch. 6 o'clock tonight. Perfect timing for the evening news. As she finished the call, I calculated quietly, Freeman would be getting home from work right around 6 o'clock. He'd probably turn on the news while Victoria prepared dinner, just as thousands of other Middletown families would be doing. He was about to discover that his father hadn't just survived his abandonment. He'd been lifted up by an entire community that valued what Freeman had thrown away. The WMTN studio felt like another world compared to the modest Community Foundation office. Bright lights created an artificial day, cameras positioned at precise angles, and Sarah Mitchell sat across from me at the curved news desk, reviewing her notes while a technician adjusted my microphone. 30 seconds, someone called from behind the cameras. Sarah looked up, her professional smile warm but focused. "Just relax, Mr. Cruz. We're going to talk about your incredible response from the community. Be yourself, D. That's why people connected with your story." The red light appeared on the main camera. "Good evening. I'm Sarah Mitchell with a remarkable follow-up to yesterday's house fire story. Joining me now is Otis Cruz, whose devastating loss has prompted what may be the fastest disaster relief response in Middletown's history." She turned toward me. "Mr. Cruz, how does it feel to receive this overwhelming support from your community?" "Honestly, Sarah, I'm still trying to process it." My voice sounded steadier than I felt under the lights. $78,000 in one day, D. I never imagined people remembered my work, remembered the small things I did over the years. What does this response say about Middletown's character? It says that community means something here, that when you spend decades helping your neighbors, they don't forget. They step up when you need them. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. It shows that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the neighbors who choose to care. Sarah leaned forward slightly. "That's interesting phrasing. Can you elaborate?" "I've learned that sometimes the people you expect to help you most are the ones who disappoint you, and sometimes strangers show more kindness than you ever imagined possible." The words carried weight I hoped Freeman would understand when he heard them. "The fund has now exceeded $78,000. How will this change your immediate future? I can buy a house outright, start fresh, rebuild my life with dignity. But more than that, I can do it knowing I earned this support through 40 years of honest work and keeping my word." Each phrase built the narrative I needed: D-worthiness, community support, the contrast between those who helped and those who didn't. Your story has been shared hundreds of times on social media. What message do you have for those still wanting to help? That Middletown is proof good communities still exist. When people need help, neighbors step up. When someone has given their best to a place, that place gives back. I looked directly into the camera. Sometimes the family that matters most is the one you build through service, not the one you're born into. Sarah's professional instincts caught the subtle emphasis. Any final thoughts for our viewers? That generosity like this restores faith in people. In less than 48 hours, I've gone from losing everything to having more support than I dreamed possible. The people of Middletown have shown me what real family looks like. Thank you, Mr. Cruz. For those still wanting to contribute, information is available on our website. The red light disappeared. "And we're clear," the director called. Sarah unclipped her microphone. That was perfect, authentic, heartfelt, exactly what people needed to hear. She paused. "You know, someone named Freeman Cruz from Middletown First Bank tried calling the station around 4 o'clock. Said he was family and needed to speak with you urgently." I felt a slight smile cross my face. "Is that so? Should I have him call back?" "I'm sure he'll figure out how to reach me when he really needs to," I said, standing and removing my own microphone. "Thank you for giving me the chance to thank the community properly." As I left the studio, I could see through the windows that other news stations had cars in the parking lot. The story was growing beyond Middletown now, spreading to regional media. Freeman's panic, when it came, would be very public indeed. My phone showed 7 missed calls from his number. I put it back in my pocket without listening to the messages. After 47 years of being available whenever he needed something, Freeman could wait a little longer to discover what consequences actually looked like. Freeman kicked off his work shoes in the entryway, loosening his tie as he called toward the kitchen. "Victoria, I'm home. Rough day at the bank, D3 loan applications, and an audit meeting that ran late." "Turn on the news," Victoria called back, the sound of dinner preparation filling their comfortable house on Oak Street. "I want to catch the weather before we decide about weekend plans." Freeman settled into his leather recliner, reaching for the remote. The 6 o'clock news was already in progress, Sarah Mitchell's voice filling their living room as he flipped through channels to find the clearest signal. Remarkable follow-up to yesterday's house fire story. Joining me now is Otis Cruz, whose devastating loss has prompted what may be the fastest disaster relief response in Middletown's history. The remote fell from Freeman's hand. His father sat across from Sarah Mitchell under bright studio lights, looking composed and dignified in a way that made Freeman's chest tighten with something between recognition and dread. "Victoria!" His voice cracked as he called her name. "Victoria, get in here right now." She appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, irritation crossing her face until she saw the television screen. Her expression shifted to something approaching horror as the interview continued. $78,000 in one day, Otis was saying. "I never imagined people remembered my work, remembered the small things I did over the years." Freeman gripped the arms of his chair. "Do you understand what we've done? $78,000. He raised $78,000. Victoria moved closer to the television, her face pale. "How is that possible? He lost his house yesterday and now?" "Sometimes the people you expect to help you most are the ones who disappoint you," Otis continued on screen. "And sometimes strangers show more kindness than you ever imagined possible." "He's talking about us," Freeman whispered. "On television. Everyone's watching this." Victoria grabbed her phone, frantically scrolling through Facebook. "The story has been shared 300 times. 300! Everyone we know has seen this." Her voice rose with each word. "Your colleagues at the bank, the neighbors, everyone at my book club." Freeman's mind raced through the implications. "My co-workers. They must have contributed to that fund. They'll know we didn't help him. They'll know we turned him away." Sometimes the family that matters most is the one you build through service, not the one you're born into. Otis concluded his interview. The television cut to commercial, leaving Freeman and Victoria staring at each other across their expensive living room. The house that Otis had helped them buy with his down payment money, the comfortable life built on his sacrifices, suddenly felt like evidence against them. "Call him!" Victoria demanded, her strategic mind already calculating damage control. "Call him right now and fix this before everyone realizes what we did." Freeman's hands shook as he scrolled through his contacts. "What do I say? Sorry, Dad. We didn't know you'd become a media sensation. We changed our minds now that you're rich. I don't care what you say. Just call him." The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. Freeman tried again immediately. Same result. On the 3rd attempt, he left a message. "Dad, it's Freeman. I saw the news. We need to talk. Please call me back as soon as you get this." Victoria paced behind his chair. "Keep trying. He has to answer eventually." But call after call went unanswered. Freeman's desperation grew with each failed attempt. Victoria checked social media again, her face growing paler as she read comments on the shared news story. "People are asking where his family is," she reported. Someone commented that they heard he had a son who works at the bank. Another person said they thought family was supposed to help first. Freeman loosened his tie further, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. "Everyone will know tomorrow. Everyone will know we refused him." On the television, another news station was now covering the story. Regional media had picked it up. Their family drama was spreading beyond Middletown, becoming a human interest story about community generosity and family obligation. "Call failed" appeared on Freeman's phone screen for the 15th time. The phone felt heavy in his hand as he realized that for the first time in his adult life, his father wasn't available when Freeman needed him to be. Victoria stood behind him, her reflection visible in the dark television screen. "Keep trying," she said, but her voice carried less certainty now. "He has to answer eventually." Outside their window, the same May evening that had brought such hope to Otis was bringing only growing dread to the son who had thrown away everything that mattered. The drive back to the Sunrise Inn felt different than my trip to the studio. Satisfaction settled in my chest like warm coffee, the kind of deep contentment that comes from a job well done. The interview had gone exactly as I'd planned, de-strategic, dignified, devastating in its understated way. Room 7 looked the same as I'd left it, but somehow felt more temporary now. Tomorrow I'd be looking at houses with Linda Watson, picking out something permanent with the money this community had given me. A fresh start built on respect rather than rejection. My phone started ringing as I sat down on the bed's edge. Freeman's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring, ring 2, ring 3, ring 4, voicemail. Immediately it started again. Freeman Cruz, ring, 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 voicemail, again. Same pattern. The desperate rhythm of someone who couldn't accept that their call wasn't being answered. I positioned myself comfortably against the headboard and started counting. Call number 5, number 6. The electronic buzzing became background music to my evening plans. Reviewing the house listings Linda had given me, calculating furniture costs with my remaining fund money. Call 12. Freeman left his first voicemail. "Dad, please call back. We need to talk about the news coverage. This is complicated." Complicated. That was Freeman's word for discovering that actions have consequences. Call 18 brought a text from Victoria. "Mr. Cruz, we believe there has been a misunderstanding. This affects our entire family's reputation." Our family. Interesting how quickly I'd become family again, now that strangers had deemed me worthy of $78,000. By call 25, Freeman's voicemails had progressed to pleading. "Dad, I know you're angry, but we're family. We can work this out together. Please don't let this destroy everything." Everything. He meant his reputation, his standing in the community, the respect he'd taken for granted while building his life on my sacrifices. Call 31 came from Victoria's phone. Same desperation, different voice. "Mr. Cruz, people at the bank are asking questions. Surely we can resolve this privately?" Privately. The way they'd handled my request for help when I'd lost everything. I checked the clock. 8:30 p.m. 43 calls in 1 hour. The display showed a continuous scroll of Freeman Cruz, interrupted occasionally by Victoria Cruz, or home, when they tried the landline. Call 49 brought a broken Freeman. "Please, Dad, I made a mistake. You have to give me a chance to explain. They're saying things about us. Things like the truth, probably." Call 55. "Dad, you're destroying our lives with this interview. Can't we talk like adults?" Adults. The same adult who'd hung up on his father the night his house burned down. The pattern shifted around call 60. Victoria took over, her texts becoming more frequent. "This is affecting Freeman's career. The neighbors are talking. We need to manage this situation immediately." Manage. Control. The same mentality that had convinced Freeman to pretend they weren't home rather than help his father. Call 70. Freeman again, his voice barely recognizable. "Dad, if you don't call back tonight, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The bank president asked to see me first thing in the morning." The bank. Where his colleagues had contributed $1,200 to help the father he'd abandoned. Call 73 came at 9:45 p.m. I let it ring like all the others, then turned off the phone completely. Silence filled the motel room. Real silence, without electronic buzzing or desperate voices begging for forgiveness they hadn't offered when I'd needed it. On the nightstand beside my phone sat the business card Sarah Mitchell had given me after the interview. "Call if anything develops," she'd said. "This story has legs." I picked up the card, studying the WMTN logo in the lamplight. Tomorrow morning would bring the next phase. Freeman thought tonight's panic was bad. He hadn't seen anything yet. I set the card carefully beside the silent phone and turned off the light. In the darkness, I could hear the ice machine humming down the hall and traffic passing on Route 4. Normal sounds of a normal evening in a normal motel room. But there was nothing normal about what would happen when I called Sarah Mitchell in the morning. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her earpiece as I settled into the same chair I'd occupied 24 hours earlier. The studio lights felt less harsh this time, more like friendly spotlights illuminating a stage where justice would finally be served. "This is a follow-up interview people have been requesting," Sarah said, reviewing her notes. "Viewers want to understand the family situation you mentioned yesterday." "I'm happy to clarify," I replied, my voice steady. "People deserve to know the whole truth." The red light appeared. "Good morning. I'm Sarah Mitchell with a special follow-up to our remarkable story about Otis Cruz and Middletown's record-breaking disaster relief response. Mr. Cruz, yesterday you mentioned disappointment with family. Can you tell us more?" "Certainly, Sarah. The night my house burned down, before I knew about this incredible community support, I did what most people would do. I called my son, Freeman. And what happened? Freeman works at Middletown First Bank, where many of his colleagues have contributed to help me. When I called that night, desperate and homeless, he told me exactly this. 'Dad, I don't need an extra mouth to feed. We have our own problems.'" Sarah's professional composure flickered. "He said that to you?" "Those were his exact words, but it gets worse." I paused, letting the impact settle. I heard his wife Victoria whispering in the background. She said, "If he comes here, let's just pretend we're not home." The studio phone lines lit up immediately. Sarah glanced at the control room, clearly receiving instructions through her earpiece. "So, your own family turned you away in your hour of greatest need?" "My son hung up on me, Sarah. Hung up on his father, who had just lost everything. The same father who'd given him $30,000 for his house down payment, $15,000 for his first car, and used his reputation to get Freeman his job at that very bank, whose employees have now contributed $1,200 to help me. How did you feel in that moment? Heartbroken, but also enlightened, because I learned that sometimes the people who share your blood aren't your real family. Real family is what this community has shown me, people who care about character, who remember kindness, who step up when someone needs help." Sarah leaned forward. "Have you heard from your son since the fund was established?" "Oh yes. 73 phone calls last night. 73. Each one more desperate than the last, because Freeman finally understands what he threw away. Not just his relationship with his father, but his reputation in this community." 73 calls? Victoria sent texts too, about managing the situation, about their reputation, about Freeman's career being affected. The same people who wouldn't let me sleep on their couch are now panicking because their neighbors know what kind of people they really are. The control room was frantically signaling Sarah. "Mr. Cruz, we understand Middletown First Bank has requested a response opportunity." I smiled slightly. "I'm sure they have. Freeman's colleagues contributed their own money to help the father he abandoned. I imagine that's created some uncomfortable workplace conversations. Any message for your son if he's watching? Freeman knows my number. He called it 73 times last night. The difference is, now he needs me more than I need him. And I've learned something important about who deserves my time and attention. That's quite a reversal. It's called consequences, Sarah. For 47 years, Freeman could count on his father being available whenever he needed something. Now he's discovering what it feels like when someone you need doesn't answer the phone." The interview continued for another minute, but the damage was complete. By the time I removed my microphone, I could see people through the studio windows pointing at me, some giving thumbs up, others talking animatedly into their phones. "That was powerful," Sarah said. "And I should mention, we've received more calls this morning than any local story in our station's history." The truth tends to resonate with people. As I left the studio, my phone buzzed with a text from Linda Watson. "House viewing at 2 p.m. After this morning's interview, you might want to buy quickly. I suspect you'll have visitors." I knew exactly what kind of visitors she meant. Freeman would be desperate enough to try anything now. But the beautiful thing about having $78,000 and an entire community's support was simple. I could choose who deserved my forgiveness and who had used up their chances forever. The morning sun felt warmer as I walked to my car. Knowing that justice had finally been served on live television, the papers felt substantial in my hands. Deed, title, keys to 847 Pine Street. Linda Watson smiled across the real estate office desk as I signed the final documents, officially becoming a homeowner again with a single stroke of the pen. "Cash purchase, no mortgage needed," she said, filing the paperwork. "Your new house is actually nicer than your old one, Otis. 3 bedrooms, updated kitchen, fenced yard. The community fund made this possible." The community made everything possible. I pocketed the keys, feeling their weight. $13,000 left over for furniture and expenses, more than enough for a fresh start. After this morning's interview, you might want to move in quickly, Linda said, lowering her voice. I heard Freeman called in sick to work today. People are saying the bank president asked to see him yesterday, and it didn't go well. I drove straight to Pine Street, taking the long route past Oak Street where Freeman and Victoria lived in the house my down payment had helped purchase. 2 cars sat in their driveway, both of them home on a Tuesday afternoon. That told its own story about how their lives had changed in 48 hours. My new house stood modest but proud, white siding gleaming in the afternoon sun. Better neighborhood than my old place, better condition, bought outright with money from people who valued what I'd contributed to this town over 4 decades. I was arranging furniture delivery times with the moving company when a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Freeman climbed out slowly, looking like he'd aged 5 years and 2 days. His work clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven, his hands shaking as he approached my front door. "Hello, Freeman." "Dad." His voice cracked on the single word. "Nice house. Community generosity buys nice things. What do you want?" "To apologize. To explain. To—" He gestured helplessly at the house, at me, at the situation he'd created. "You've destroyed our lives with that interview." "I didn't destroy anything, Freeman. I told the truth. You destroyed your own life when you said I was an extra mouth to feed. You could have come to us privately, worked things out within the family. Like I did the night I lost everything, when I called you privately and you hung up on me." I stepped onto the porch, looking down at the son I'd spent 47 years supporting. "You had your chance for private. You chose public. Victoria didn't mean what she said about pretending not to be home. She meant every word, just like you meant every word about not needing an extra mouth to feed." I pulled out my phone, showing him the call log. 73 calls, Freeman. 73 times you tried to reach me last night. How many times did you call to check on me after the fire? 0. Freeman's shoulders sagged. "The bank let me go this morning. They said my personal situation reflected poorly on their community values. Victoria's friends won't speak to her. The neighbors cross the street when they see us. Consequences. People donated $15,000 yesterday after your interview. $15,000 more to your fund because they were so disgusted with us." Tears filled his eyes. "Dad, I'm your son." "No, Freeman, you were my son. My son would have helped his father when everything was lost. My son wouldn't have listened to his wife whisper about pretending not to be home. My son would have remembered $45,000 in help over the years and offered a couch for a few nights. What do you want from me?" "Nothing, that's the point. For the first time in your adult life, I want nothing from you. I have everything I need from people who actually care about character." Freeman stood in my driveway for a long moment, understanding finally settling in his face. "So that's it? We're done?" "We were done the night you hung up on me. This morning's interview just made it official." He walked back to his car without another word. I watched him drive away, knowing it would be the last time he'd darken my doorway. The son who'd taken everything and given nothing back was finally gone from my life. An hour later, the Hendersons arrived with a casserole, then the Wilsons with fresh bread. The Thompsons brought coffee and stayed to help arrange furniture. By evening, my new house buzzed with neighbors who'd become real family through their actions rather than their bloodlines. I stood in my new doorway as the last visitors departed, looking out at a neighborhood where people valued kindness over convenience, character over comfort. Behind me, warmth and light filled rooms furnished by community generosity and my own fresh start. Freeman was somewhere across town, facing the consequences of his choices with a wife who taught him that family obligations were optional. They'd discovered that selfishness has a price, that small towns remember character, and that some mistakes can't be undone with desperate phone calls. Justice served tastes better than revenge ever could. I closed the door on my old life and turned toward everything good that lay ahead. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.